I'd just like to briefly say a few words about our keynote speaker this evening. So Ned is a serial entrepreneur who discovered his passion for startups while developing novel applications of RFID technology during his years at one of the most prestigious and arguably best technology center in the world, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, better known as MIT. His work there led to a creation of MIT Auto ID Center that produced technology standards that later were adopted by Electronic Product Code Organization as a world standard. After holding several positions with increasing levels of responsibility of public software companies, Ned co-founded his first startup in computational biotech space. After an exit, Ned took on the co-founder and CEO role of another startup in a publishing space. And after a successful exit with that venture, Ned was asked to run a high-tech biotech equipment company. After a few years of profitable growth at that company, Ned felt strong pullback to his software roots and decided to start his current company, Cape Ann Tech. The impetus for starting Cape Ann Tech was Ned's desire to create an outsourced software development service company with high customer satisfaction at its core. Today, Cape Ann Tech provides exceptional quality custom software solutions while developing strong long-term partnerships with its clients. The Cape Ann Tech clients are both Fortune 500 companies and successful startups. Ned is also a board member of MIT Enterprise Forum NYC and a former Olympic athlete. There's so much more about Ned that everyone needs to know, and that's why we've invited him to be our keynote speaker this evening, to share his life story, to share about the ups and downs, provide some tips on how to get started in your entrepreneurial journey. So ladies and gentlemen, join us in welcoming Mr. Ned Lomigora.
This is my honor and privilege to give this presentation, especially because there's so many of fellow Bosnia and Herzegovinians on the call tonight. But before I start the call, and I just wanted to extend more wishes and speedy recovery to Faris and Rasha Zacina and Mr. Amer Bukvic. So I wanted to start, I'd like to start with a question. A question is, why not you? For a lot of people on this call, younger people especially, who are thinking of becoming an entrepreneur, I just want to start with a question. I want you to ask yourself, why not you? Why do you think that you cannot be somewhere among these people, the most well-known entrepreneurs in the world? First thing you have to do before you start anything or before any dream is to visualize the success. So if you can visualize yourself here, that is a first step. Why I chose this particular slide is something specific about that. The one thing is, you will notice that they're all men, and that's something I will talk about later, because we need more women entrepreneurs, and we need to support more women in entrepreneurship. The other is that the age of these men is really peculiar, because often there's this myth of entrepreneurs are 20-year or something entrepreneurs, but that is a myth, because as you will see, age plays a big role. And then the other thing is, if you go back and study the background of many of these men, there are always exceptions. You will find out that many of them came from a very privileged background. So I will actually talk about privilege in becoming an entrepreneur, how privilege plays a huge role in becoming an entrepreneur. But if you don't have privilege, and if you're not white man at certain age, you don't have to worry, because you can overcome. So the way you overcome things, that the odds, is through perseverance. And through perseverance, I did the same thing. Back in Bosnia, when I was around 12 years old, I started training for sport luge. And you know, that's the kind of sport where you have to be dedicated, and you have to go and train every weekend and after school. So, you know, I couldn't socialize like with my friends, and I couldn't do things that all of them did. And at some point I actually wanted to quit, but I didn't. So that actually led me to become, to get to the Olympics, and that opportunity to be at the Olympics led me to the United States. So to me, perseverance was a path to success. The other thing that I wanted to point out to everybody is that whenever I think about significant events and moments in my life, I always think about people that actually helped me get there. So it's really true that it's not the events or moments that really define our path. It's the people that make those moments or events possible. And so this is a picture of myself and my best friend, who actually got me to train luge. We did everything together. So at the same time, you know, he was the one who got me interested, and because we were best friends, I started doing luge as well. So it's really kind of his fault that I got into luge. And later, when during the war, I was invited to represent Bosnia. It was my coach that actually asked me to join the Olympic team. And because of that, I ended up in the Olympics. And because of the Olympics, I ended up being in the United States. So growing up in Bosnia, I probably had a very similar experience to what students experience today. There was this educational system that kind of stifled creativity. You know, I liked asking a lot of questions, and I liked things that might not be as popular, like arts at the time, but it wasn't very cool back then to stand out. You know, if you had all good grades, but you didn't play sports, that was something that wasn't, that, you know, other kids would pick you on. So it wasn't generally something that you want to do, standing out and being different. I remember asking questions, and one particular case, I asked my biology teacher something about why protein synthesis happen specifically in ribosomes. And my teacher was kind of baffled by my question because they're not used to being asked questions. My peers kind of thought it was irrelevant. And then another instance of that is when I was doing a math problem, I would do problems on the board, which was common back in the day. And you know, when asked to solve a problem, I would skip a few steps. And the rule back then was you have to show all of your work. Because I didn't show my work, I get problem solved correctly. I got a B, and the explanation was, well, you got A+ for understanding of the matter and skill, but you get C- for you know, the order and rules, and so, you know, the average was B. But these kinds of skills, you know, thinking, being intuitive, and also asking a lot of questions actually became an asset. So when I went to later to MIT, and when I became an entrepreneur, these skills became really important, and actually they determined my success. So what I wanted to basically leave with is, you have to think different. And even though this is a slogan that we have seen many, many times, it's really not a cliche. You know, there's only one of you, so stay true to yourself. Don't be afraid to think differently, because if you subscribe to herd thinking, you know, you cannot be an effective leader. So do not hesitate, do not be afraid. During the war, you know, I lost, like many people, both, you know, friends and you know, material goods. And during the war, you know, my mom reminded me that you can lose all these things, but you can never lose your education. So I really, whenever I had a chance, read books on engineering and math, and always dreamed of a better future. So the opportunity for me to leave came when my coach called me and asked me to represent Bosnia in the next Olympics. But there was a catch, because we had to leave under cover of a night, and there was a very cold February night, and risk, you know, being shot, because, you know, enemy snipers were shooting at people who were trying to cross. So we did, and you know, took a huge risk. I could have been killed and shot back then, but luckily I survived and was able to leave. And at the same time, there were those that stayed behind me, and you know, they could not leave. And so I just do want to emphasize it's very important to always think about people that fared worse than us in life, and that we should never be, we should never elevate ourselves above them. because we just had better opportunity to leave and maybe get better education, better life outside. We should never look down on those two that actually stayed and did not have that same opportunity. Once we got out, we started training like crazy. It was really high pressure environment to perform. You know, at the same time, we were happy to, you know, have running water, food, and not being afraid, electricity, not being afraid to be, you know, killed. But our hearts and minds were still back in our country because we were thinking of our families and we were worried about them. And, you know, luge is kind of a sport where you're going down a luge track at over 90 miles an hour, and you don't really have a lot of time to think about mistakes you're making. You have to always look forward and focus what's in front of you. So that kind of mentality really helped me when I became an entrepreneur, because you don't have a lot of time to dwell on. You learn quickly and you move on. So at the same time, you know, during this period of time, I developed this mental. I get the news during my training that my sister got wounded, and that really set me back mentally. So I really had to work hard to stay focused, stay energized, and, you know, finally through all that, I learned how to deal with pressure in very tough situations. So eventually, after all that training and all that preparation, we were able to get to Lillehammer to compete in the Olympics. And that was something that the kind of experience that I have never had later in my life, where, you know, the entire world is really in one place. We were able to just meet a lot of very famous people, and you know, after each event, after you finish your event, you would mingle with other athletes, and you would attend all kinds of parties, and that was all wonderful. But to me, the real purpose that I saw in this opportunity was to network like crazy, to meet other people, to really you know, take advantage of the opportunity that I was there in the center of the world for that 1 month. And I met lots of TV stations, I met a lot of radio stations, I gave a lot of interviews, and through that experience, you know, I really learned how to tell a story. So my first kind of you know, foray into really serious networking was at the Olympics, and that stayed with me for the rest of my life. I used that. I learned how to network, and I was not, you know, shy to approach anybody. So that helped me a lot later when I was raising money or getting customers for my startups. The other thing is that I learned is how to tell a story that's very compelling, that really moves people, and that's also the opportunity I got at the Olympics. So there I met somebody, and through the conversations, and somebody who heard those conversations in the United States, who worked for a US Senator at the time, decided to help me. And that story that I was giving was very compelling. And I said that, you know, I do wanted to move to the United States. I, you know, did not have life back in Bosnia. So they helped me by getting me a visa. They went and worked through the sea of red tape, and they got me a ticket. And that's how I actually eventually ended up in the United States. Once I was in the United States, I worked ferociously. It was very on an accelerated pace to complete my studies that I started in Bosnia. They were interrupted by war. And I would take 6, 7 courses, and then I would work as a tutor on 2 subjects. I would work in the lab, and I would also play basketball to earn some money because I had nothing. Basically, I came with nothing. Luckily, I was given merit scholarships, and I didn't have to pay or take loans, which is a great thing, and especially here in the United States, where student loan debt is 1.5 trillion in only public, as well as 120 billion in private loans, which is a really, really big problem. So I was very lucky, actually, that I didn't have that problem. So eventually, one night, I believe it was February, you know, after I applied, my professors at the college I was getting my bachelor's degree told me that I should apply. So I applied for only top 5 schools in the country, because, you know, usually apply to more, but I picked the hardest school to apply to. They all accepted me, but I picked MIT because MIT is the best engineering school in the world, and it always has been. So I get a call, you know, the way that happens really, I got a call February night from a professor who said, look, you know, we wanted to extend you welcome to MIT, and told me that I was accepted at, you know, top 2% of incoming graduate students, which was a dream come true. I was given a full scholarship and a choice of working in any lab I wanted at MIT with any professor or on any topic that I choose. That was a great honor and opportunity. And then once I started, you know, I moved right after. I didn't even take any time to any break for myself. The moment I graduated, I was already packing and leaving for Cambridge. And once I got there, I worked the entire summer and fall, and by spring, I already finalized my thesis, which was a record pace. And actually those theses, you know, if I just had to do that, would be enough for my initial master's. I was in the fast track, and I still had to take, you know, semester full of courses. But great thing about that is that my work actually got basically taken, and the center at MIT was founded based on some research, my research, and that actually brought MIT a lot of funding from both public and private sector. So that was kind of like my first foray in software and building software, because I did something very unique and innovative, trying to solve a problem of, you know, robotics, telerobotics problem, trying to figure out how I can now, you know, control robots at distance. And I had to use cameras and a lot of processing power and a lot of very complicated algorithms to figure out, you know, distances and shapes using only cameras, which was very complicated. You know, you need a PhD just to be an expert in that area, and I didn't have time to become a PhD, you know, to get another PhD. So I basically figured out, like, turn the problem upside down. I said, what if I, you know, map sensory? I created a sensory map of the entire space that I'm trying to control. And so I use RFID technology, which was very rarely used back then. It was really in initial stages, and I came up with the idea to minimize it and make it, you know, very specific to this application. And that kind of opened up opportunities for us to create a center. I also had a great friend who helped me, you know, kind of get into this startup mode, because we were always competing and challenging each other. And then we started coming up with all these business ideas. Also, MIT is in the center, you know, of innovation, because you have startups all over MIT campus. You have MIT alumni starting companies very successfully. So that was really impetus for me to start really thinking as an entrepreneur. But I didn't quite at that time start a company yet, because I had to decide, you know, what I wanted to do. I was on this fast track, and the question was to either pursue the PhD or go out and, you know, pursue a business career or get a real job, right? In the meantime, I get a job offer, you know, because I was starting to kind of put feelers out there, and multiple job offers. One of them was from NASA. And I wanted to mention this because at the time I had no clue what it was about. And they just told me they wanted to, they saw a software I did. They had a presentation. Somebody saw my software and application I built, and they thought it would be perfect for something they were planning to do. I had no clue what they were talking about because it was top secret. So this was a center in Pasadena. And then later, when it became public, I found out this was the project that, you know, they wanted me to build the virtual interface, very similar to the one I built at MIT to control Mars rover on Mars, because you cannot use cameras. There's a 7+ minute delay between Mars and Earth. And the only way to really move a robot around is through a virtual interface, a virtual reality interface. So anyway, that was that. I said no to NASA, but I knew that the future is in software. So my choice was really to pursue that path. I felt passionate. And also there was a financial decision there, because I wanted to start earning money as a student with a stipend. You know, there was really very little I could earn over time. And getting a PhD, even on my fast track, which was 3 years, which was really, really fast by MIT standards, you know, I would still have to work as on my stipend, with my stipend. So I wanted to earn some money to send back to parents and support them. So there I had the choice, you know, business versus academia. And, you know, I decided to get a job with a software company. Internet startups were booming, economy was booming. So that was a great time for me. And I really had a good experience. working right away for a very large software corporation, very hyper growth. So it was financially very rewarding. It was also very challenging and great problem solving opportunity. But at the same time, I realized while I was very good at problem solving and convincing people to do things a certain way, there wasn't much room for innovation, right? There was more about it. Large corporations are more about politics and following through existing, status quo and making your bosses look great, which is perfectly fine. And somebody who wants to continue on that track just has to be aware of that. But if you're a really original person, you have great creative ideas, it's very difficult to execute them in corporate environment. However, corporate environment taught me a lot of great skills, and those skills I really leveraged when I became an entrepreneur. And one of the things that a lot of entrepreneurs need, as a matter of fact, probably the most important thing if you're starting a company, is to know how to sell. And I don't mean this in a sleazy, salesy way. It's selling in a way that you can explain to somebody why your product or service, as complicated or complex as it may be, in a simple way, why can that help them with their business or life? So explaining and simplifying things that are complicated takes a lot of practice, skill, and it's art, in art form. But I got my training by working with a top salesperson in my company in my first job, and then I had opportunity to talk to Fortune 100 companies, top level C-level executives, and see how it's done. That really helped me. So at some point, I decided that I wanted to leave and start my own company. So this is after my third corporate job, where I basically, I saw there's a glass ceiling for creative people and originality. So there was a great opportunity. Company invested in a startup that I co-founded. It was like a great opportunity to kind of just jump in with funding and jump in with some technology. So on surface, we really had a good track record. But one of the things that I wanted to emphasize, when you're trying to understand whether you want to stay in a company or whether you want to join another company or whether you want to start your own, I would suggest a framework to choosing this path, because this is a framework that worked for me. Now it may not work for you, but it's really something that I would recommend. First of all, look around your company. If you're thinking whether to stay or join another company, pay attention to how people in that company talk about themselves and talk about their colleagues. Do they refer to them as we, or do they say they? There's a big, obviously, huge difference between the two. Also, pay attention to employee engagement, because studies have shown that in the United States, more than 50% of employees are not engaged, right? So you want to be in a company where you see that people are very engaged. You don't want to be in a company that's just kind of plowing through. It's not going to really be satisfactory for you. Also, another thing is very important that has been done more and more recently is to look for companies that provide more autonomy to their employees. And autonomy you can define by ability to choose between, or at least influence or impact your choices on what tasks you're working on, what team you're working with in your company, the time frame that you have for doing the work, and what technique. For example, in software industry, it's like a stack. What stack you want to use to actually build certain solutions or products or whatever else. And then a really important thing is that you have to gauge whether you love what you do or not. Because if you don't love what you do, doesn't matter, all these other things don't really matter, because you cannot be passionate without loving what you do to endure long working hours and years of years spent in one company to advance. And then in the end is really shared purpose. Feel whether you are everyone's pulling in the same direction. Do you have shared purpose? This, for example, we are here tonight. We all feel that shared purpose. We're all here together because we have that shared purpose, and we all volunteer because we believe in that shared purpose. So, be in those kinds of environments, work for those kinds of companies, and hang out around the same kind of people. So my big jump into startups, right after corporate, I switched to startups. And I just mentioned that how, company I was working for just invested and gave us free reins, basically, and we started with some technology, and we on paper looked really, really good. But in reality, it was really a shiny object, as I learned, because at the end, when we exited, and we did exit, we sold company, we sold IP and technology that was developed over several years. But he also burned millions and millions of dollars, and we didn't get a single customer, and we got zero revenue. So on paper, we might be successful, but to me, that was a failure. So you have to really understand the dynamic of the startup. Not every success is a success, right? The second startup came right after. I joined a publishing startup, and they had a product, they had a good idea, and good intentions, but the product wasn't fitting the market very well. The market they were targeting was the analytics product on analytics platform for authors, and they were trying to sell to authors and who want to self-publish in small publishing houses, and that is really a very difficult problem to solve because you have to market to many diverse groups and many individuals. So marketing is very expensive and complicated, and because I had B2B experience selling to businesses, I looked at it from a different angle, and I said, what if we position this as a problem where we're going to sell this platform to bigger companies, and they can actually use that platform to attract more authors and also to make those authors more equipped to sell to their own targeted audience, because this platform helps them target audience better. And so the investors actually sided with me. I became a CEO from being a co-founder, joining a company, and then becoming a CEO, and we exited by selling that company to a publisher. My third startup, it was actually the one that I thought would have the most potential. It did, because it had to do with college savings. I came up with the idea that, a lot of these 529 plans, at that time I had, my daughter was born, and I had, I became a father. So for a few years, I was, contributing to this 529 college savings plan. And I came up with the idea, like every Christmas or every holiday or every, birthday, I see people, spending a lot of money on these gifts in the United States, right? That's just common practice, just like it is in Bosnia. And so I figured if part of the money could be given to, contributed to college savings, that would be really great, because over time you can really accumulate. And back then you can only contribute if you're part of a family. So I wanted to open up to friends outside of the family to contribute, because that would really increase the pool of money available to kids to go to college later. And I mentioned in the beginning the huge problem of student debt in the country and how difficult it is. So that was really great idea, I worked with my friend. That was excellent setup and team, but we realized at some point that we had huge regulation hurdle, because we had to go through some really hard hoops for us, and we needed a lot of money and expertise to do it. And so that startup couldn't succeed because it's just like overwhelming amount of work and time and resources to actually get to that point. But a few years later, I saw a lot of big companies executing that same idea. So it was possible for them. So idea was great. It's just, timing, we were ahead of our time. Along the way, in these several startups, and I had some others that I mentored, and I was, helping as well. So I do a lot of mentoring on top of, being the startup founder. Is I learned that there are top traits for me that are most important when I'm choosing who to work with, and my co-founders or members of my team. Those are integrity, passion, and competence. And you have to have all three, to pass the mustard. So for me, those are the three key tenets of anybody who I want to work with. So startups did teach me a lot. I gained valuable experience, and experience counts, as a matter of fact. Because if you look at the average age of the founder, it's actually 42 years. 42-year-old typical founder. It's not your 20-year-old something entrepreneur, but it's a 42-year based on the MIT Sloan study. So, if you're in your 20s, you have obviously, a lot of time. The advantage of somebody in your 30s or 40s is that they have a lot of experience and maybe some savings. So you can be an entrepreneur pretty much at any age. So that is the message. And just because you're a certain age doesn't mean you can't be a great entrepreneur. So things that I learned about what makes a startup successful, I can summarize in few points. The number one success factor for me, no matter what else you have going for you for a startup, is that unless you have a product market fit, you will not be successful. You can have funding, you can have everything else, great team, but if your product is not solving the right problem, if there's a misfit between your solution and the product and what market wants, you'll not be successful. I talk about that a little bit more, how you actually get to that point when I talk about minimum viable product, which I will explain a little bit. But for now, just remember that. And also, I learned very quickly that a degree is much, much less important than actual experience. So my first startup, I was green. I didn't know anything. I thought I could do lots of different things. And by my third startup, I learned so much. I had so much more experience that made me much more productive. So my degree, didn't really help me. Like I was actually taking an executive MBA while working on my first startup, and I didn't find it very, very useful. So I want to talk to you a little bit about MBA. While MBA is great for corporate jobs and for financial jobs and working and running a large company, entrepreneurs are not necessarily to be an entrepreneur, you don't necessarily need an MBA. And it comes, I had this experience because I had an executive MBA, and I didn't see that a lot of these skills were applicable. And it's not just me, a lot of people, would agree. And I just want to give you a couple examples here to kind of consider. What you really need is few things to really be successful. Again, this is from personal experience. This is from years of working with startups, successes and failures combined. One of the most important thing that you need is to hire multitaskers. So don't chase big degree, MBA, whatnot. Find people that are really good multitaskers that can wear 3, 4, 5 hats. They work really hard, crazy hours. I mentioned earlier, learn about how to build a minimum viable product, because that will really help you get to product market fit as fast as physically possible. And that will really pay off dividends for you. Also, learn what makes a product or service great. The way you can do that is to really research what's out there, pick a product or service that you like and study it and think about it, read about it. What makes it so great? Why do you like that product? Do the same thing with products you don't like or you don't think they're so great, and learn about them as well. Develop this analytical mind because that will, really help you define your product when you build one, and will help you figure out how to make that product stand out. This is one thing that I really like to do, which is seek negative feedback. That's why having mentors that are very open and frank with you is very important. So another derivative of this is surround yourself with people that will not always be telling you nice things. You want people that will be telling you important and realistic things about your product or service or company, and they will be honest with you. So that is something a great mentor would do. And then learn to innovate. Why did I say learn? Because innovation or being innovative is not an innate or some rare talent. You don't have to invent anything or something completely new to be innovative. You just have to take a product or service that you may find that already exists and then make it a magnitude better than it already is, right? It cannot be a small improvement, a small increment. It has to be a significant increment. And you have plenty of low-hanging fruit out there, you know, really crappy products. Everyone knows some. So think about those things, how you can improve them and make them significantly better. That is innovation, right? So it's not, again, it could be learned by doing a lot of inquiry, and who knows, maybe when you develop something like that, you know, and you come up with ideas and ways to improve existing products, maybe a company that makes the crappy products will buy you out. Spend a lot of time talking to people, customers, and learning from them. What are the biggest mistakes that startups make? So it's very important that you learn from others' mistakes as much as possible, and to avoid them, so that you don't get into the same cycle. So these are some of the biggest mistakes that I've seen. There's some others, but I just want to point out 5. One of the top ones for me is not clear on the problem. This works for me, and this works for startups I was mentoring and advising. If you're not clear on the problem, if you haven't spent years, maybe years, understanding the problem, maybe working in industry or a company where you're aware of the problem, it's very difficult to build a solution to that problem that would be effective. So you have to be very clear on what problem is. The other is not measuring what users do. So let's just say you build a product, you put it out there, and now people are using it. And you know, you're not really getting into the weeds of like, what are they using? What part of the product they're using? What part they like? What part are they not using? What part they don't like? So you have to be very, very careful with metrics that you set to measure how your product is performing. And you have to measure, you know, have to use a lot of analytics. And you'll be surprised, but a lot of times that doesn't happen. Then another one is like delaying and hesitating to launch a product. A lot of great companies started as very scrappy, you know, products that, you know, when they came out, when they were launched, no one knew about them. And even now, nobody can remember some of these significant companies, you know, when they launched back in the day. So if you're delaying the launch, you're just wasting time a lot of times. You know, you just need enough to put it out there, put the product or service out there so people can start using it, because the key here is to get a lot of feedback very quickly. So hesitation really robs you of that time that you could spend learning based on feedback that you get with even a crappy product, right? Just go back in time and research how some of these really major companies started. What was their first website? What was functionality available on that website or an app that you like? And you will realize how, you know, crappy these applications or websites and functionality was back in the day when they started. And another is really, if you don't care about customers you're trying to serve, and I mean really passionate to help them and really empathize with them, you will not be motivated to really work hard to develop solutions that they need. So examine this relationship with your customer. You know, if you just are, you know, happy and passionate about the product for products purposes because you're, you know, perfectionist, you want to create a great product, but you're not really passionate about people you're trying to help with that product, you're not going to be successful. You have to have that passion and connection. And also, when you're starting a company, most companies are started with a co-founder. There's obviously notable exceptions. So it's very good to have a prior relationship with between co-founders, because it really helps solidify that relationship and helps in difficult times with conversations that you have to have with your co-founder. So I recommend highly that you have some sort of relationship and understanding between yourself and others that are starting a company, if you're starting with somebody else. I want to switch and talk about privilege a little bit, because that is something I think many people in Bosnia may realize, that United States is United States, Bosnia is Bosnia, and then people are all over the world. So we don't all have same, when it comes to starting a company, we don't have the same resources. Maybe some of you recognize Andrew Yang. He ran for Democratic candidate for president last year. This is a picture of him and I in Midtown Manhattan last year, summer sometime. And the reason I want to point Andrew out is because he wrote a great paper a few years ago, and also had a foundation that emphasized helping, foundations called Venture for America, that emphasized helping entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs, to build businesses that, in areas of the United States that were disenfranchised. And he actually wrote a paper showing that entrepreneurship is very closely correlated with privilege. And so, there's an overlap between your family resources and your family wealth and how successful you are, because it enables you to really stay in the game much longer and forego salary and not worry about putting food on the table and whatnot. So there's definitely a headwind for those who are not privileged, which doesn't obviously mean that they can't do it. There's always a way, but just be aware that just because somebody's successful, and most in the United States, actually most entrepreneurs have come from families with wealth and great connections. So just because you see somebody very successful doesn't mean that they're better than you. It just means that potentially they have a lot more resources, but it doesn't mean that they don't have to work hard. It just means that they have a better starting position. Which leads me to this myth of meritocracy. There's always, this myth, and especially propagated through Silicon Valley. And right now that, we're much more aware than we were in the past about these myths. But even today, the reality in Silicon Valley is that it is not this innovative meritocratic wonderland that they portray it to be. The women and people of color are still being lowballed by recruiters, and they're passed over for promotions. And another common myth is that there's some inherent personal attributes that make one an entrepreneur, right? Well, entrepreneurship does require a lot of grunt work, a lot of repetitive work, without which anyone would be successful. But there's definitely, a benefit, like I said in the beginning, of having some resources. And then there's a myth of, single-handed entrepreneur inventing things and changing the world doing that. And it really is not the case. A lot of these inventions and a lot of these startups in great companies have been done with lots of success and failure in between, and a lot of people that were never given the credit. So that is also another myth. That's why they call it the Silly Valley, I guess, for a reason. But let's talk about another very big topic, which Silicon Valley is known for, which is venture capital. Because a lot of people, when they think of starting a company, immediately start thinking about venture capital. Well, here's the deal. You think venture capital is that important? The fact is that venture capitalists fund only about 0.1% of all US ventures. And of those, only 0.001 are actually very successful and that they make huge returns. So it's not the case that, you have venture capital is not dominating. You can build your company without venture funding. Many have done that. You can start a company while still working for your own company, for a current company, which is an option that many people take. And even if you get a huge amount of funding, it doesn't mean that you will be successful, right? For example, I have a neighbor back when I was living in Boston area. I had a neighbor who is a founder of a company that actually builds satellites, low orbit satellites, to deliver high broadband internet to population, to regions in the world that are underserved and hard to reach. And that company raised over $3 billion and then went bankrupt. And they couldn't, out of say 600 satellites they had a goal to deliver by that time, they only delivered about 60, right? So it doesn't matter how much money you're given, it's not a guarantee of success. And also, in addition to VC, you know, there's other sources, which is crowdsourcing, which has been booming during COVID, growing by leaps and bounds, while venture capital has stagnated, actually. So don't worry about that. If you can't get venture capital, there's definitely other ways, and other people have done it. So how can you overcome the odds? We talked a lot about odds, you know, privilege, raising a lot of money. So what are the ways you can overcome these odds? Well, these are the skills that you have to develop. You can only do this with skill, and this is really true. The way you you know, overcome these odds is to hire the best people you can get. And I don't mean best people with best degrees, best credentials, people that are best for your business. They could have the best experience. They can be people with, you know, specific niche expertise, or the hardest working people. But you have to find them. You have to select them. So that's number one. Number two would be, even though you might not get the venture capital, you will definitely be at some point in front of venture capitalists, and you will definitely at some point want to raise some money. So learn how to impress venture capitalists. And the way you do that is to really know how to stand your ground, how to be very clear about expectations, and also associate yourself with people that could be your mentors or advisors that can actually help you, that venture capitalists recognize and respect, that they will provide more credibility to a startup. And your goal is to really show venture capitalists how your startup, your venture can make them returns of at least tenfold or 10x or more. So that's the goal. And then selling, I mentioned that, how important that is for every entrepreneur to know how to sell. Actually, selling, I would say, is even more important in tech world than building technology, because you can come out and launch with a crappy technology, but if you don't know how to sell, you'll never get a customer and never get ongoing revenue that will eventually grow your company. Same with marketing. Learn, even though you don't have to be an expert, learn how social media marketing works. Learn how to position your company. Those are really good skills, or at least learn how to find great people that can do that. And then last but not least, learn how to create a great culture so that your company doesn't fall apart from within. Where great culture could be learned. The way I do it is I look at great companies that I admire, where they have a great employees have great employee satisfaction, and also their customers are very happy with their service. So I try to emulate what they do, and you can do the same. I like to talk about women entrepreneurs. I touched up on at the beginning when I showed that slide of all men, that there's something missing on that slide. And I mentioned that we need to support more women entrepreneurs. And I will say this very, very frankly, that women are simply better entrepreneurs, okay? Data after data shows that women-funded companies are far better than male-founded companies, and they're returning higher revenues, higher profits, they have faster exits, they have higher profitability. So all of these things are something that women are just proven better at. They have a higher emotional quotient. They have they're less prone to cognitive biases, and have better decision making than men. Okay, that's just facts. And also, women in emerging markets are the fastest growing population of entrepreneurs. There was a study done by Boston Consulting Group and Mass Challenge in 2018. And by the way, I'm a mentor to Mass Challenge and very involved with Mass Challenge, a great organization, a startup accelerator in originated in Boston. It's the biggest one in the world. Their study in 2018 found that, for every dollar invested, that women founded or co-founded startups returned 78 cents for each dollar invested on average, while male-only founded startups returned only 31 cents for each dollar invested, right? It's also shown that gender diverse founders, basically with men and women, produce higher diversity teams, and those teams perform better. Gender diverse founding teams have more ethnically diverse employees. They have ethnically diverse executives as well as boards. However, women only receive about less than 3% of global venture capital, and that is a current issue that needs to improve. The point is that if you want to really increase your startup's chances, significantly increase those chances of success, you really need to have a mixed man-women founding team. And I would like to say that, by next year, I would like to have, and I like the startups that we have this year. There are lots of startups with pitching that have women co-founders in them. And by next year, I'd like to have twice as much female founders and twice as much female judges on the panel by this time next year for this competition. All right, so let's try to summarize quickly what we learned so far. So we have meritocracy doesn't exist in Silicon Valley. I kind of covered that very, very deeply. And you can go ahead and do some research on your own and really find out some background on founders. There are certain exceptions like Steve Jobs and Jack Ma, but a lot of entrepreneurs came from very privileged backgrounds. So, and also the way minorities are treated are very different than white man counterparts. So that is just the fact. The other thing is that investments actually follow entrepreneurs. So when we talked about VCs, a lot of times people think that they have to be in a place where there's a lot of money to be successful, like Silicon Valley. But, for example, Omaha, Nebraska has the highest number of billions per capita in the world, and there are no startups there. And that's because the Berkshire Hathaway's located there. So you have all these billionaires there. So it's not just where money is, it's really not the case. So it's really the other way around. Finance is very mobile and it follows entrepreneurs. The other thing that I want to mention, especially for people in Bosnia, is that politics is not just for politicians. Politics is for everybody because it really determines the way your life is set up, and policies that impact your business, and if you want to become an entrepreneur, will become really important. So just because you don't like politics doesn't mean you can't be actively working on bettering your situation. And I encourage young people to really get engaged and impact policies that will help them, start more businesses or generate more revenue and have more freedom in building their startups. And then I do want to say that a lot of times when you start doing something and you have hesitations, people tend to overthink things and do, they have analysis paralysis. Don't overthink it, just overdo it. Okay, so that is another thing. When you every time you find yourself thinking too much and having a roadblock and not sure what to do, just, jump in and start doing it. You will feel better and you will see the difference. There's some magic in doing things. Now, after all what I said, and I'm convinced that, your mind is definitely more capable of accepting that it really should be you. It should be you. You can be an entrepreneur. There's definitely hurdles, but there's definitely ways to overcome those hurdles. You can succeed as an entrepreneur, and I sincerely I sincerely hope that you choose that path. And thank you for the time. Thank you for the opportunity to give this presentation.